The release of those new photos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate that we've been reporting raises a fresh set of questions, and I'm hoping my next guest can help answer them. Democratic member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Suhas Subramanyam of Virginia, is with us now. Congressman, it's good to have you here. The Democrats tell us that the committee got 95,000 plus images. Just 19 were released today. Can you help us understand what went into the discussions to release these specific pictures? Like, how are you going through these materials?
Yeah, so first, we've only gone through about a fourth of the 95,000 images and documents. So there's a lot more to be found. But certainly, these 19, I think, paint a picture of a couple of things. One, they show us that all these rich and powerful men, Democrats and Republicans, who were rumored to be associated with Jeffrey Epstein, were found in pictures in Jeffrey Epstein's estate. That's where these pictures and images are coming from. Jeffrey Epstein kept these in his estate. And so the second thing is, Donald Trump keeps saying that he didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes when he knew Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, here he is once again with many women. We don't know if they're victims or not, so that's why we blocked their faces. But again, Donald Trump keeps coming up. And former Prince Andrew, now Andrew, keeps coming up. Some of these other folks keep coming up. And so this is more evidence of some of the associations that Jeffrey Epstein had with rich and powerful men.
But there is no context surrounding them, right? So, for example, we don't even know, were these pictures taken after he was a convicted sex offender? So should there be concerned about maybe guilt by association or people taking implications away from that aren't necessarily fair?
The release of new photos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate raises a fresh set of questions that demand answers. And we have someone here who can actually help provide those answers. Democratic member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Suhas Subramanyam of Virginia, sat down for an interview to discuss what the committee has found, what they're releasing, and what's still coming. And what he reveals should concern every American who wants accountability for the powerful men connected to one of the most notorious sex traffickers in modern history. First, let's establish the scope of what we're dealing with. The committee obtained 95,000 plus images and documents from Epstein's estate. 95,000. That's an enormous trove of material. And today, they released just 19 photos. 19 out of 95,000. So the question immediately becomes, what went into the decision to release these specific pictures? How are they going through all this material? What's the process? By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. Congressman Subramanyam explains that they've only gone through about a fourth of the 95,000 images and documents so far. There's a lot more to be found. But these 19 photos paint a very clear picture of a couple things. First, they show that all these rich and powerful men, Democrats and Republicans, who were rumored to be associated with Jeffrey Epstein, were actually found in pictures in Epstein's estate. That's where these images are coming from. Epstein kept them in his estate. This isn't speculation or conspiracy theories. These are documented associations. Second, and this is crucial, Donald Trump keeps saying he didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes when he knew Epstein. But here he is once again in these photos with many women. The committee has blocked the women's faces because they don't know if they're victims or not, which is the appropriate thing to do to protect potential survivors. But Trump keeps coming up in these materials. Former Prince Andrew keeps coming up. Some of these other folks keep appearing repeatedly. This is more evidence of the associations Jeffrey Epstein had with rich and powerful men. Now, the interviewer raises a fair point. There's no context surrounding these photos. We don't even know if they were taken after Epstein was a convicted sex offender. Should there be concern about guilt by association or people drawing implications that aren't necessarily fair? Subramanyam's response is important. They're trying to piece this together, but this isn't the first time Donald Trump or Bill Gates or even Steve Bannon has been mentioned side by side with Jeffrey Epstein. It's very important to understand that every single time documents get released from the Epstein estate, we keep seeing the same names over and over again. Now we're seeing images to go along with the documents. And here's a detail that's both bizarre and telling. There was even a picture of a Donald Trump branded condom. Think about that for a second. Epstein not only had Trump branded condoms, but he took a picture of them and kept it in his estate all these years. What does that tell you about their relationship, about the nature of their association? This isn't casual acquaintance stuff. This is the kind of personal detail that suggests a much deeper connection. The context that's most important to Subramanyam is the fact that the Epstein estate had these pictures, these professionally taken pictures of Epstein with his associates and colleagues who have been rumored to be connected to him for a long time. These aren't random snapshots. These are professional photographs that Epstein kept carefully preserved. Why? What was their purpose? Were they insurance, blackmail material, trophies? Evidence of the access and power he cultivated? The interviewer raises concerns about some of the women in the photos. Their faces were blurred, but they may be able to recognize themselves, or people who knew them at that time may recognize them. What conversations happened around trying not to re-traumatize survivors and their families? This has been a high priority for the committee, according to Subramanyam. They've been in contact with victims' families and the victims themselves to make sure that when they release photos and files and documents, they redact them when victims wish to be redacted. In some cases, like last time with Virginia Giuffre, the Trump administration actually unredacted her name. They outed a victim. So the committee doesn't want to do that. They don't want victims to be outed or forced to come forward through their process. They're going to continue being vigilant about protecting survivors. But here's what's really important. These documents were not part of the DOJ documents. This is just the estate material. And this comes from a subpoena that's 4 months old that the Trump administration hasn't responded to. They have until next week to comply with the law now because Trump signed the bill mandating release. So we're very interested to see what comes out because this is only the tip of the iceberg. Congressman Robert Garcia suggested that there are some powerful people the committee might want to talk to. So who does Subramanyam, as a lawyer who understands how investigations work, still want to speak to? What are the clear questions the American people have a right to get answers to and from whom? Some names come up over and over again in these materials. Subramanyam wants to talk to people who visited Epstein's island. He wants to talk to people who visited his mansion repeatedly. And he certainly wants to talk to anyone who has information about the inner workings of Epstein's crimes and his criminal enterprise. Because that's what this was, a criminal enterprise involving sex trafficking of minors. We have Ghislaine Maxwell, but she's a serial liar according to Subramanyam. She hasn't told the truth. She's not a reliable witness, but they want to talk to some of these other folks. Andrew, the disgraced former prince, the Clintons. Everyone who has information about Jeffrey Epstein should come forward. That's why they've agreed to subpoenaing many of these people. They're going to continue trying to get as much information as possible. That's what any lawyer would do in a situation like this. The Epstein estate has been producing records on a rolling basis to comply with the subpoena. What else does the committee expect to obtain, and how quickly? Subramanyam explains they've continued pushing banks and financial institutions to release files they have on Epstein. The victims told them that financial documents tell the story of his crimes. His business dealings were intertwined with his crimes and personal life. They have to get those records because they're going to be very important to the investigation. The Epstein estate has more documents too. They've been very cooperative to date, and there's more to come. With this current batch, 75% is left to go through. The committee wants to make sure they have all the information and that they release all the information as publicly as possible while still protecting victims. So how long will it take to go through the remaining 3/4 of these materials and make decisions about what else should be released publicly? It's a lot, according to Subramanyam, but as soon as possible. They have a great team on the Oversight Committee working through them. He's hoping in the next week they can get everything they need to be able to release what needs to be public. Now let me step back and talk about why this matters so much and why the Trump connection is particularly significant. Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed he barely knew Epstein, that they had a falling out, that he had no idea about Epstein's crimes. But every time new evidence emerges, Trump is right there in the materials. Documents mentioning him, photos with him, Trump-branded condoms in Epstein's collection. This isn't guilt by association. This is a pattern of documented connection to a convicted sex offender and sex trafficker. And Trump's explanations keep shifting and contradicting the evidence. First, he said they were great friends. Then he said he barely knew him. Then he said they had a falling out over real estate. Then he said he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. The stories keep changing, but the photographic and documentary evidence keeps showing deep connections. And remember the context here. Trump has been credibly accused of sexual misconduct by more than 24 women. He was found liable for sexual abuse in court. He bragged on tape about grabbing women by their genitals. He talked about walking into beauty pageant dressing rooms where underage girls were changing. He made creepy comments about his own daughter. This isn't someone with a clean record suddenly being unfairly associated with a sex trafficker. This is someone with a long documented history of predatory behavior being connected to perhaps the most notorious sex trafficker of our time. The Trump administration's decision to unredact Virginia Giuffre's name is particularly telling. That wasn't an accident. That was a deliberate choice to out a victim, to expose her to additional scrutiny and harassment. Why would they do that unless they're trying to intimidate victims and discourage them from coming forward with information about Trump's involvement? And now Trump has until next week to comply with the subpoena because he signed the bill mandating release. The irony is delicious. He signed legislation that now forces his own administration to produce evidence about his connections to Epstein. He thought he could control what gets released, but Congress has its own subpoena power, and the estate has been cooperating with oversight committees. So we're about to get a flood of new information. 75% of this current batch hasn't been reviewed yet. The estate has more documents beyond this batch. Banks and financial institutions are being pressed to release Epstein's financial records, which victims say tell the story of his crimes. And all of it is coming out whether Trump likes it or not. Bill Clinton's name comes up too, and absolutely he should answer questions. If he was on that island, if he was at those properties, if he has information about Epstein's activities, he needs to testify under oath. Same with Prince Andrew, who has already been credibly accused by Virginia Giuffre. Same with Bill Gates, whose association with Epstein has been documented. Same with anyone else whose name appears repeatedly in these materials. This cannot be a partisan issue. This has to be about accountability for powerful men who enabled, participated in, or covered up sex trafficking of minors. Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. If you were involved, you should face consequences. If you have information, you should provide it. The victims deserve justice, and the American people deserve truth. But there's a difference between Clinton or Gates or others appearing in these materials and Trump. Trump is currently president. Trump has the power to obstruct investigations, to intimidate witnesses, to classify information, to use the apparatus of government to protect himself. Trump appointed judges and prosecutors who might give him favorable treatment. Trump controls the Justice Department that would be responsible for any federal prosecution. That's why the congressional investigation is so crucial. Congress has independent subpoena power. Congress can compel testimony and document production. Congress can hold public hearings that create a record even if DOJ won't prosecute. And Congress can inform the American people about what really happened even if courts and prosecutors fail to deliver accountability. The fact that only 19 out of 95,000 images have been released tells you how massive this trove is. Think about what might be in the remaining materials. More photos of Trump, photos of other powerful men, documentation of trips to the island, financial records showing payments, communications revealing what these men knew about Epstein's crimes. Victims have said the financial records are key because they show how Epstein's business dealings were intertwined with his criminal activities. He wasn't just a sex trafficker operating separately from his legitimate business. His wealth, his connections, his access to powerful people, it was all part of the same ecosystem that enabled and facilitated his crimes. Following the money will reveal who benefited financially from association with Epstein, who did business deals with him, who received investments from him, who got access to his network of wealthy and powerful people. Because that financial entanglement creates leverage. It creates reasons for people to look the other way, to not ask questions, to protect Epstein even when rumors about his behavior were widespread. The professionally taken photographs that Epstein kept carefully preserved suggest someone documenting his associations for for a reason. Insurance against powerful people turning on him, evidence of how connected he was to demonstrate value to other elites, blackmail material to use if anyone threatened to expose him, all of the above. We may never know Epstein's full motives, but we can see the effect, which was creating a documented record of his relationships with some of the most powerful men in the world. And Trump appearing repeatedly in that record, along with Trump-branded items in Epstein's personal collection, paints a picture of someone who was much closer to Epstein than he's ever admitted. You don't have branded condoms at someone's estate from a casual acquaintance. That's personal. That's intimate. That suggests a relationship where such items would be shared or given as gifts or jokes between friends who were very comfortable with each other. The next week is going to be crucial. The Trump administration has to comply with the subpoena. The committee is pushing banks and financial institutions for records. They're working through the remaining 75% of this current batch. More photos will be released, more documents will be made public, and the American people will get to see even more evidence of who Jeffrey Epstein really was and who he was connected to. Congressman Subramanyam and the Oversight Committee are doing the work the American people elected them to do, investigating, demanding accountability, protecting victims while pursuing truth, using subpoena power to compel production of evidence, working with the estate that's been cooperative, pushing reluctant institutions to release records, and making as much information public as possible while being sensitive to victim privacy and trauma. This is what congressional oversight looks like when it's done right. Not partisan witch hunts, not fishing expeditions, but following documented evidence, building a factual record, and demanding answers from powerful people who have avoided accountability for far too long. Whether you're Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or Prince Andrew or anyone else, if you were part of Jeffrey Epstein's world, you owe the American people and the victims an explanation. 95,000 images and documents, 19 released, thousands more coming, financial records being pursued, witnesses being subpoenaed. This investigation is just getting started, and everyone connected to Jeffrey Epstein should be very worried because the truth is coming out whether they cooperate or not. The estate is producing records. Congress has subpoena power. Victims are demanding justice, and the American people are paying attention. The tip of the iceberg. That's what Congressman Subramanyam called this. Which means what we've seen so far, as disturbing and revealing as it's been, is nothing compared to what's still coming. Buckle up. The next few weeks are going to expose a lot of powerful people who thought they'd gotten away with enabling or participating in or covering up one of the worst sex trafficking operations in American history. Justice delayed is not justice denied if we finally get accountability, and that accountability is coming.